Good evening, everyone. A very happy new year to all of you. After a wonderful discussion on preoperative anesthetic considerations by Dr. Suruchi, I will be dealing with intraoperative anesthetic considerations in COVID recovered patients. As of 31st December 2020, more than 58 million patients have been recovered from COVID 19 in the world. In India, the figure is more than 9 million. Even in UP, it is more than 5.2 lakhs. With this lecture, I will attempt to provide some insight into the problems expected to be encountered and their management in perioperative period. Although there is no definite recommendation or guidelines are yet available. This patient population may have experienced a spectrum of severity from mild asymptomatic infection to moderate to severe disease and multi-organ failure. The patient who have had asymptomatic or mild illness can be managed normally, although in patients with moderate to severe illness, intraoperative concerns may be more and they may require more vigilance. They may be free of symptoms or with residual symptom at the time of presentation. Fatigue, shortness of breath, chest pain are commonest symptoms that may persist for long in these patients. They could be either because of persistent cardiac or pulmonary dysfunction. Post-traumatic stress disorder is also a frequent finding in this cohort of the patient. It may also persist for long. With or without these symptoms, patient may present to us for emergent, time-sensitive, or elective surgery. If there is emergency, then surgery must proceed. For time-sensitive surgeries, such as in malignancy, timing should be decided after discussing with surgical colleagues regarding added risk and alternatives. It may be a reasonable approach to obtain pulmonary function test to classify residual lung pathology in order to guide intraoperative and potential postoperative ventilatory management. If the patient is having any symptoms suggestive of myocardial dysfunction, echo should also be considered. Elective procedure should ideally be delayed until the patient has recovered to baseline cardiopulmonary status. That can be depicted by symptomatic recovery. So for optimization of the patient's medical condition and physiologic status and to decrease the risk of postoperative pulmonary complications, which are higher within the first 4 weeks after the diagnosis, American Society of Anesthesiologists and Anesthesia Patient Safety Foundation joint statement has suggested timelines for elective surgery. These are for asymptomatic patients or patients who have recovered from the mild non-respiratory symptoms. It is 4 weeks. The patient who were symptomatic but did not require hospitalization, it is 6 weeks. Symptomatic patient who is diabetic, immunocompromised, or hospitalized, the timeline is 8 to 10 weeks. And the patients who was admitted to an intensive care unit, it is 12 weeks. Although these guidelines should not be considered definitive, the decision to proceed with elective surgery must be individualized. It should be based on the type of procedure to be performed, patient comorbidities, and residual symptoms, including exercise tolerance relative to baseline and the risk of delaying surgery. Multiple considerations exist for anesthesiologists, including residual pulmonary dysfunction, myocardial dysfunction, lingering sequelae of arterial and venous embolic phenomena with associated anticoagulation, adrenal insufficiency from corticosteroid courses, neurological manifestation, and residual neuromuscular weakness in the subset of critically ill patients. And awareness of these issues is of prime importance for anesthesiologists caring for this growing patient population. If there is a choice, regional anesthesia should be preferred over general anesthesia, although patients and procedure selection is very important under regional anesthesia. And if you expect the surgical procedure to be finished well within the block time, then we must go for the regional technique. One concern here is that few patients may be on extended thromboprophylaxis. That may affect the timing of surgery or decision to use neuraxial anesthesia or deep peripheral nerve block. Avoiding GA also lowers the risk of postoperative pulmonary complications. If the patient is having residual shortness of breath and deranged pulmonary function test, it is suggestive of residual pulmonary dysfunction. A recent follow-up study published in November 2020, pulmonary function abnormalities has been seen even at 3 months after the discharge. With 85% of the patients showed residual CT abnormality and 36% of the patients showed chronic fibrotic changes. Impairment of diffusion capacity is the most common abnormality found in a recent study, followed by restrictive ventilatory defect at the time of hospital discharge. It was around 30 to 84% according to the disease severity. These findings were further proven in a recent systematic review, which include follow-up studies in which the time of assessment varies from 1 to 3 months after the discharge. The long-term effects of COVID-19 on pulmonary system include impaired diffusion capacity and restrictive lung disease. It also includes decrease in the total lung capacity and lower respiratory muscle weakness. So in these patients, ventilation management can be challenging. Lower tidal volume and modest PEEP are a reasonable approach in order to avoid overdistension of the viable lung tissues. Cardiovascular complications are myocarditis, myocardial infarction, arrhythmia, heart failure, thromboembolism, and stress cardiomyopathy. So, if the patient is having shortness of breath or dyspnea on exertion, it may be a result of myocardial dysfunction that can be assessed with echo. So, there must be a high index of suspicion for residual cardiac involvement in hemodynamically unstable patient if other causes of hypotension are ruled out. So we must be vigilant for perioperative cardiac event, especially in patients who have experienced severe or critical illness. Preparation should include drugs like inotropes, vasopressors, antiarrhythmics, and defibrillator. Advanced hemodynamic monitoring may also be considered. Now the effect on the coagulation. COVID-19 is known to result in hypercoagulable state with a high risk of arterial and venous thromboembolic phenomena. This all is because of excessive inflammation, platelet activation, endothelial dysfunction, and stasis. In the largest study till date of more than 3,000 hospitalized patients, COVID-19 patients, published in JAMA, the incidence of thrombotic event in ICU patient was as high as 29%, and in non-ICU patient it was 11.5%. Even the delayed thromboembolic complication have been reported late after the recovery at different point of times. Recently, National Institute of Health has given a guideline for extended thromboprophylaxis in certain high VTE risk patients that is based on the VTE risk score and D-dimer level after discharge from the hospital. So for the patient who are on anticoagulant, attendant effect of outpatient anticoagulation on hemostasis may be a concern, especially in emergency cases. Other concerns related to coagulation are difficult vascular access and pulmonary embolism due to venous thrombosis. Arterial embolic phenomena to vital organs such as brain and heart may result in stroke and MI. Hemorrhagic conversion may be a concern in patients with embolic stroke with heparinization for procedures requiring cardiopulmonary bypass or administration of tissue plasminogen activator for clot lysis. So a meticulous review of prior central nervous system imaging should be undertaken before such procedure. Other than the stroke and intracranial hemorrhage, critical illness myopathy is another neurological consideration which is related to prolonged intubation and immobility. So in patients presenting for surgery after long ICU stay, avoiding the use of succinylcholine may be prudent to reduce the risk of rhabdomyolysis and hyperkalemia. Less doses of neuromuscular blocking agent may be needed, and it might be better to consider train-of-4 monitoring in such patients. Now, the neurocognitive and the psychological symptoms these includes post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety. Incidence of post-traumatic stress disorder in COVID recovered patient is 24%. Being a potential risk factor, intraoperative awareness can further increase the incidence. which can worsen the overall physical and mental health outcome. So BIS monitoring should be considered in these patients. PTSD is also a risk factor for emergency delirium. To prevent this, preoperative counseling is important in these patients, and it should include the concern of the patient related to the procedure. Regional anesthesia should be preferred when possible, and multimodal pain management regime should be instituted. Prolonged use of corticosteroid that is more than 2 weeks may be associated with fluid retention, hypertension, hyperglycemia, increased risk of infection, and osteoporosis. So, beside blood sugar and hemodynamic monitoring, added care to be given during positioning, and complete aseptic precaution must be followed. According to the American Society of Anesthesiology guidelines, a dose of 20 milligram of prednisolone per day for 3 or more weeks may be sufficient to cause hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis suppression. We should consider stress dose of corticosteroid during perioperative period in these patients if other causes of hypotension are ruled out. So to summarize, regional anesthesia should be considered when possible. Vascular access may be difficult in these patients. Complete aseptic precautions should be followed. With the possibility of osteoporosis, added care should be given during the positioning. Avoid the use of succinylcholine. Less dose of neuromuscular blocking agent may be needed. Trainer 4 monitoring may be considered. Lower tidal volume and modest PEEP approach for ventilation may follow. BIS monitoring, blood sugar, hemodynamic monitoring must be considered, and multimodal pain regime should be followed. So finally, I would like to conclude by saying we have to be vigilant for any sort of perioperative cardiac event. Expected complications are intraoperative pulmonary embolism, stroke, MI, and arrhythmia. So thank you everyone for your kind listening. Stay safe, stay healthy.